Right now, as you watch this, something almost impossible is happening inside your skull. 3 pounds of soft, pale tissue that looks and feels like cold tofu, is generating a universe. Your entire reality, every color you've ever seen, every person you've ever loved, every fear that's ever woken you at 3 a.m., all of it conjured from meat. And here's the strangest part. Science still doesn't fully understand how it does it. The most sophisticated technology ever built by human civilization cannot replicate what your brain does before your morning coffee. So, what exactly is going on in there? What is this thing you are? And why should the answer to that question fundamentally change how you see yourself? Let's start with the raw physics of the situation, because the numbers alone should stop you cold. Your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons. That's already incomprehensible. But it's not the neurons that matter most. It's the connections. Each neuron can connect to up to 10,000 others, and together they form somewhere in the range of 100 trillion synaptic connections. That is more connections inside your skull than there are stars in 1,000 galaxies. And every single second, this network is humming, firing, rewiring, predicting, adjusting, burning about 20% of your entire body's energy supply despite being only 2% of your body weight. Your brain is the most energy-hungry organ in existence. It is also, without question, the most complex structure we have ever encountered anywhere in the observable universe. But complexity alone doesn't explain experience. It doesn't explain why you feel something when you hear a song you loved at 16. It doesn't explain why the smell of rain on dry pavement can throw you back to a childhood afternoon in seconds. To understand that, you need to go smaller, much smaller. A neuron is, at its core, an electrical device. It receives signals from thousands of its neighbors through tiny branching arms called dendrites, integrates all of those incoming signals, and if the combined charge crosses a threshold, it fires, sending an electrical pulse screaming down its axon at speeds of up to 270 miles per hour. At the end of that axon is a synapse, a tiny gap between one neuron and the next. Here, electricity is converted into chemistry. Neurotransmitter molecules flood the gap, drift across, bind to receptors on the receiving cell, and are converted back into electrical signals. This handoff, electrical to chemical to electrical, happens trillions of times per second across your entire brain simultaneously. This is how your neurons talk. This is how your brain thinks. And the entire conversation happens in silence, in darkness, in the wet electrical dark inside your skull, with zero breaks from before you were born until the moment you die. Now, here is where it gets extraordinary. Neurons that fire together wire together. This is Hebb's rule, one of the most fundamental principles in all of neuroscience, and it means that every experience you have is physically changing the structure of your brain, right now. As you process these words, synapses between specific neurons are strengthening or weakening. The physical architecture of your mind is being remodeled in real time by the content of your thoughts. Your brain is not a fixed machine. It is a living sculpture that you and the world are constantly reshaping. Scientists call this neuroplasticity. And for most of the 20th century, the dominant belief was that adult brains were essentially fixed, that the neurons you had by your mid-20s were more or less the ones you were stuck with, slowly dying off as you aged. That belief is now known to be spectacularly wrong. Your hippocampus, the brain's memory hub, continues generating brand new neurons well into adulthood, a process called neurogenesis. Exercise accelerates it. Chronic stress suppresses it. Sleep is required for it. Even the way you think, whether you approach challenges with curiosity or with dread, shapes the rate at which your brain physically rebuilds itself. You're not just using your brain. You're constantly growing it or shrinking it with every choice you make. But let's go deeper, because understanding neurons and synapses is like understanding individual pixels. To see what the brain is actually doing, you need to zoom out and look at networks. Your brain is not a single organ doing a single job. It is dozens of specialized regions, each carved out by millions of years of evolution, working simultaneously, in parallel, in constant negotiation with each other. Your visual cortex at the back of your head processes sight. Your auditory cortex on the sides processes sound. Your prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead, handles planning, decision-making, and impulse control, the seat of what we call reason. Your amygdala, deep and ancient, processes threat and emotion with a speed that bypasses conscious thought entirely. Your cerebellum, folded at the base, handles coordination and timing so precisely that you can catch a ball thrown at your face without thinking. Each region speaks a different dialect of the same electrical language, and your experience, the seamless, unified feeling of being you, is the result of all these regions talking at once, constantly, in a symphony of billions of simultaneous signals. Here is something that should unsettle you just slightly. Most of what your brain does, you are completely unaware of. Your conscious awareness, the narrative voice in your head reading these words, the sense of being a self, of being present, of experiencing. That is a tiny sliver of your brain's total activity. Beneath the surface, enormous computational machinery is running at full capacity without ever surfacing to consciousness. Your brain is regulating your heartbeat, calibrating your balance, filtering out the sensation of your clothes against your skin, predicting the next word of this sentence before you hear it, and making thousands of micro-decisions every second, all without asking your permission or even informing you. In a very real sense, consciousness is not your brain's primary job. It is a side effect. A story the brain tells itself to make sense of what it has already done. And this leads to one of the most jaw-dropping discoveries in modern neuroscience. Neuroscientists like Benjamin Libet first suggested it decades ago, and more recent work has sharpened the finding dramatically. Your brain initiates a movement, measurably, electrically, up to several seconds before you consciously decide to make it. The decision happens first in the brain. The conscious experience of deciding comes after. Free will, at least as most people imagine it, may be less a cause of your actions and more a narration of them. You are not the captain of the ship. You are, in many moments, the ship's historian, writing the log of decisions that have already been made. This is not settled science, and the debate is fierce and fascinating. But the core finding, that unconscious neural processes lead conscious awareness, has proven remarkably robust. Now let's talk about what your brain is fundamentally built to do. Because the answer is not what most people think. It is not to think. It is not to feel. It is not even to perceive the world accurately. Your brain's core evolutionary function is prediction. This is the central insight of what neuroscientists now call predictive processing, one of the most exciting theoretical frameworks in all of contemporary brain science. According to this model, your brain is not passively receiving information from the world and then interpreting it. It is constantly, aggressively generating predictions about what it expects to encounter, what the next second will look, sound, and feel like, and then using incoming sensory data only to correct its errors. You're not experiencing the world. You're experiencing your brain's best guess about the world, constantly updated by reality. Think about that for a moment. Every color you see, every sound you hear, every texture your fingers feel. None of it is the raw world. All of it is a model, a controlled hallucination, as neuroscientist Anil Seth puts it, constructed by your brain and projected outward. The brain builds this model from your prior experiences, your current state, your emotions, and your expectations. Which means two people can stand in the same room, hear the same words, and genuinely, neurologically experience entirely different realities. Neither is lying. Their brains are simply running different simulations, built from different histories. This also means that perception is deeply emotional. Your emotional state, carried by brain systems like the limbic network, the insula, and the anterior cingulate cortex, acts as a prior, a bias, that colors every single perception you have. When you are anxious, your brain's threat detection circuitry is already primed, and ambiguous information gets interpreted as dangerous. When you are joyful, your predictive model leans toward safety and opportunity. Your emotions are not reactions to reality. They are filters through which reality is constructed in the first place. The brain you wake up with in the morning, tired, stressed, grateful, hopeful, is not a neutral instrument. It is a tinted lens that tints absolutely everything. And it doesn't stop there, because emotion, perception, and decision-making are all tangled together in ways that demolish the ancient idea of a rational brain at war with its emotional instincts. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's work with patients who had damage to their emotional processing centers revealed something extraordinary. People who lost the ability to feel emotions didn't become more rational. They became incapable of making decisions at all. They could analyze every option perfectly, but could not choose between them. Emotion, it turns out, is not the enemy of rational thought. It is the engine of it. Without emotional signals guiding which outcomes matter, the brain's decision-making machinery has no ground to stand on. Reason without feeling is a car with no steering wheel. Beneath all of this, the neurons, the networks, the predictions, the emotions, there is one question that neuroscience is circling with increasing urgency and increasing humility. Why does any of this feel like anything? Why is there something it is like to be you? Why, when your visual cortex processes wavelengths of light around 700 nanometers, do you not simply compute long wavelength detected, but instead experience the vivid, warm, irreducible sensation of red? This is what philosopher David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness, and it remains one of the greatest unsolved questions in all of science. We can map every neural correlate of every experience. We can watch love, grief, and creativity light up on a brain scan. But we cannot yet explain the gap between a pattern of electrical signals and the felt quality of being alive. Some theories, like integrated information theory, suggest consciousness is a fundamental property of certain information structures. Others, like global workspace theory, propose it emerges when information is broadcast widely enough across the brain for it to become available to multiple systems at once. And some physicists and philosophers have gone further still, suggesting consciousness may be woven into the fabric of reality itself. Not something the brain produces, but something the brain tunes into. None of these answers are settled. All of them are extraordinary. What is settled is this: you are not your brain. You are what your brain does. You are the ongoing, never quite finished result of 86 billion neurons in constant conversation, predicting and correcting and feeling and deciding and remembering. All of it shaped by everything that has ever happened to you, and all of it capable of changing. Right now, today, with the right experience, the right challenge, the right relationship, the right idea. Neuroplasticity doesn't switch off at 25. It doesn't end at 60. The brain you have today is already different from the one you had before you watched this. Different synapses are stronger. Different predictions are being updated. Different patterns of connection have been quietly redrawn. You have just, in the truest and most literal sense possible, changed your mind. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Not as a throwaway ending, but as something worth carrying into the rest of your day, your week, your life. If your brain is a prediction machine built from the sum of your experiences, filtering all of reality through the lens of your history, then the most radical act you can perform is to give it genuinely new experiences, to go somewhere unfamiliar, to talk to someone unlike you, to sit with an idea that makes you uncomfortable, to learn something that rewires your model of the world. Because every time you do that, you are not just thinking differently. You are becoming different. You are physically rebuilding the structure of your own mind. The brain is not a cage you were born into. It is a living architecture you are building every single day, with the raw materials of your choices, your curiosity, and your courage to understand what you are. And now that you know a little more about what you are, what are you going to build next?